It's the secrets that make us sick. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. So let's have a conversation on this time. We're taking it out of the box. Yeah, yeah. We're taking it out of the box. We're taking it out of the box. You know it's time. So let's talk about it.
Well, hello, everybody. It's that time. The time is now for Outside of the Box. And we have a great show for you today. We have some new faces, some new conversations that we are going to be having today. And I cannot wait for us to get started. So, first off, let's bring in uh, this wonderful woman of God, Miss Charlzetta. Hey, Charlzetta, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is going to be a fantastic uh, conversation, so I can't wait to jump in. So we're not even going to belabor. I will tell you, we're going to have a couple other people who will be popping in and out to kind of fill out and round out the conversation. But let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody else. Everyone, let me just put that in there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight's conversation, we're going to be talking about surviving divorce. Um, we talked about relationships before in the past, Charlzetta, and we've had the opportunity to kind of consider um, different parts of relationships, what makes them successful, what makes them fail. We've had the opportunity to talk about why um, uh, people cheat, why there's infidelity. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, our show was about surviving infidelity and if it was possible to move forward. So, I guess the first question to kind of um, get us jumped off, if you will, is um, how did you come? I'm sorry, Josetta. Let's see. How did you come to the decision that divorce was something that you wanted to do? Not wanted to do like it was what you wanted, but how did you come to the decision that divorce was what was necessary for you?
Oh, um, so initially I counseled with my my spiritual mom and my pastor, and um, when we initially separated, I guess so. It took about a year and a half to actually make the decision to
Okay.
actually file for divorce. And after, of course, that year and a half of counseling with my pastor and my spiritual mom, and us praying and fasting together about it.
Uh,
For me, I wanted to be able to move forward. And one of the things that I said was, and for me it was God. It was me talking to God about it. And I wanted to make the decision to be able to start over. I didn't close my heart to if me and my ex-husband would reconcile. But I knew I needed to move forward. So actually I did it with the intention of being able to freely be able to move forward, whether that meant reconciliation one day or just moving forward to be free for whomever was, that may come into my life. So for me it was time after about a year and a half for me to make the decision to move forward. And moving forward, I wanted to be have the freedom to just be not have anything hinder me from moving forward.
so, uh, so was it then your experience that staying in the relationship was somehow uh, forgive the crass word, but bondage? Because you said you wanted to be free. So in my mind, the opposite of freedom then is bondage. So did you feel like being in that relationship was bondage for you?
Yes, in a spiritual sense as well as in a physical sense, because as long as we were separated and he was, I chose not to date or not to do anything until I made a decision. It wasn't just because I know some people think that just because you're separated, well, you decided not to be together, so move forward. Well, for me, that wasn't my truth. Like for me, it was once I made the decision of what was going to happen, whether we were going to reconcile or divorce, that would be where I would make my take the next step. So yes, it did feel like bondage in the sense of I was stuck. I couldn't move forward. I definitely wasn't going backwards, but I couldn't move on with my life emotionally because I was stuck in, well, what if, or maybe, or is it possible? So that and I wanted off of the emotional roller coaster, because as long as we stayed legally married, it kept me bound to him. And I no longer wanted that. I wanted to be free to make my own choices, even if it included one day being back with him.
Reconcile.
Hmm.
Okay, so right before, so I took us kind of in the front. Let's go back a little bit more. So you said that the decision came after the counseling, this, that, and the other. I want to kind of go back to that portion. When did you decide, or when did y'all decide that your relationship was in need of fixing, or the resolution of it would be divorce?
I think it wasn't mutual. Initially, it wasn't mutual. I made the decision because we kept growing further and further apart. There were no actions taking place for us to address issues or address concerns. Um, Even talking, it wasn't that we were rude or disrespectful to each other, but we weren't addressing those issues and talking. So the wedge just continued to get further and further apart.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna pause with you, Q. What? Uh, how did you come to the decision that divorce was something that needed to happen for y'all?
I didn't initially come to the decision. That was something that she decided at the time. So initially, I was totally opposed to it. I was kind of shocked and surprised that it was just whiplash. I didn't know what was going on. One day, um, I thought things were well, and then out of the blue, it was I want a divorce. So, and for me, that's a little strange for me because usually I I pride myself in being a pretty
Aware.
yeah, I pay attention to what's going on. So usually things don't totally surprise me to where I'm not I didn't see it coming, but that was definitely something that I didn't see coming. So it was a shock, and it went from that statement was made, which at that time we were not. I don't do the threatening games. We never threatened to divorce. So those are words that I just don't use. We didn't use. So it's when those words were said, it carries a lot of weight. I know a lot of times people when they get in arguments, then they use it as an automatic
Let's
default in a
get
fight.
divorced then.
Yeah, we never use that type of language. So for me to hear that, then I knew that it was something serious. And it literally went from that declaration to by that weekend there were papers printed out, and all of it didn't happen that quick, but that's how determined she was to get things done and finalized. So I was an emotional wreck. I didn't know what was going on. I was trying to save my family. I was trying to save our relationship. um, and it was a very, very tough time.
Wow. So unlike Charzetta's experience, which was more kind of a gradual process. You're saying yours was like, whoa, what happened?
Right. And I don't think we ever had. I never felt like we had a bad relationship. We definitely had some problems earlier on. We were both young. I was 26 when I got married, and she was 20. We both had bouts of infidelity. We both just there was issues that we had, and then it's one of those things to where you think you got past all of that stuff, and you're like, okay, we everything is fine, and we're past all of that. So now we can actually, move forward into our adult roles after we got rid of the kind of the childish behavior. So you're talking about years removed of those type of issues. So to see it now is, so my point is, if that would have came out, if she said she wanted a divorce maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, yeah, I kind of seen that coming in. But when it happened after we supposedly, were clear of all of those issues, it was absolutely a shock.
So, Chozetta, what do you think the hardest part about making the decision to, in fact, divorce was? When you were weighing staying, divorcing, what was the hardest part about making the decision to actually divorce?
Because I was still very much in love with him and I wanted our marriage to work. So I wasn't divorcing him because I no longer had feelings. It was just the right thing to do for me.
Uh-huh. So then how did, and Q, you start thinking about this because I'm going to ask you this question next. So how did divorce affect your self-esteem? And it's a lot. How did it what impact did a divorce have on your life, on your children, on your self-esteem? Like, what was the impact of the divorce?
Ooh, of course, devastating because I'm an advocate for marriage. I think marriage is amazing, and I think that the way that God designed it is just wonderful when we do it His way. So for me, I was still in I don't want to call it a fantasy, but just still in the high expectations of it could be amazing and awesome. Uh, so it was like a hard fall, and for me, it hit when I finally did make the decision. It the build up to leave. Um, I would say that it wasn't in the build up to leave, but it was um, the way things happened. Because for me, all of it transpired kind of in like within a week. So I was a stay at home mom. I wasn't working, and I had a baby. Um, so um, it hit like I felt like a failure. I felt like um, there's no way to bounce back from this, even though I knew, like, I was like, I'm a Christian and I'm strong, but like, how do you bounce back from this when you believed and tried to hold on to your faith, and that's the determining factor for you. So it was devastating to my faith. It was devastating to my emotions. It was devastating to my self-esteem. Um, it was just, I felt like somebody had sucker punched me.
Mm.
Like, not that I was in a fight and I'm waiting on someone to hit me, but like I'm just walking down the street, like singing,
And out of nowhere,
here
boom.
comes somebody. Yes, and not only do they don't punch me in the face and knock me out, they hit me dead center in the stomach that knocks the wind out of me. And then you kind of when you raise up and you're like, what just happened? So I was left there, like, what just happened?
So for you, Q, what was the hardest part outside of, not the hardest part, but what was the impact that it had on all of the different areas of your life, your life in general, your kids, your self-esteem? Like, what was the real impact that divorce brought?
I, like Charles Etta said, I felt like a failure. Um, my grandparents were married for over 40 years until my grandfather passed. My grandparents on my other side was married for over 60 years until my grandfather passed. You know, my grandmother and grandfather, they had 8 kids. All of their kids, up until that time, divorce is just not something that we did. My parents have been married for over 40 years, and at this time, for me to get a divorce, I felt like I was the failure. Absolutely. One of the hardest things for me to do was to tell my mother things are not going well. We're about to get a divorce. I just absolute failure. I felt like a failure to my kids. Um, there are certain things that I never forget. Having I couldn't bring myself to do it, but when my ex-wife told my son, who was 7 at the time, that we're getting divorced, to see him break down in tears, that's something that I don't I don't just see it, I feel it every time I think about that. So it's certain things that you'll never forget. As far as my self-esteem, that's a little bit different. Now there was just a lot of terrible things that were said. I was talked about, demeaned. Hey, you know, I don't want to be in this relationship no more. We've been at it for 10 years. I see that you're never going to be more than what you are. It was just a lot of demeaning things that was said, either because she felt that was the truth, or she wanted to back me off and she wanted me to stop trying. But she literally tore me down with words in that process. Um, my self-esteem personally, that's a little bit different because I've never, well, I'm not gonna say never. In my adult life, I don't lack a lot of confidence as far as my ability to bounce back and rebound. But at that time, I definitely, just for my family, I felt like a complete failure, and it was it's one of the worst experiences. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody.
Now, before I bounce back to Charzetta and ask her, because she said something and I wrote it down and I want to get her opinion. But before I do that, I want to ask you, I guess, ask her rather, um, were there was there that kind of emotional bloodshed between you and your ex-husband?
No, because I had questions, and he just that he couldn't answer initially. It took about probably 7 years for him to finally be able to have the conversation. So it was, I was just kind of stuck, really, honestly, because he couldn't give me answers. He couldn't me what was going on, why. He just kind of shut down. And so I just was kind of lost with, so I have to move forward making decisions without any information other than the fact that it's our marriage is falling apart, you know.
So you said something, and I certainly want to hear Q's perspective on this as well. But you said something, so I want to follow up with you first. You said, I still, something to the effect, I still believe in marriage. I still believe in the beauty of it. If we had did it his way. What did you mean by that? I know you meant God's way. So to you, what is marriage God's way?
Oh, honestly, I would say marriage God's way. It begins and ends with your individual growth. When I think God's way, and if a person, this is just what I believe, if you're growing individually in your faith and as a person, you can't help but to enhance anybody that you get with, no matter where you are. And so when I say God's way, I mean with the understanding that I'm going to make choices. I'm going to consider you. When I'm angry or when I'm disappointed or when I'm hurting, I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm going to ask you to pray with me. So being willing to fight the flesh, being willing to do what is required and what's being asked of us spiritually necessary in order for me to be everything that God has called me to be. And so I think if I do that individually and he's doing that individually in our marriage, it can't help but flow, especially when we have those times of frustration or transitions or changes, because we have something bigger than us helping us to be better. So that's what I mean by when I say God's way.
Q, what do you think of the concept of marriage would be successful, or could be successful, would be, I guess would be the more appropriate word, if it were done God's way?
Yeah, I don't. Okay, so a couple things. Number one, that leaves a lot of room for interpretation. And everybody's definition of God ain't the same definition. So a lot of people who use that
Of God. If you took your definition of God and marriage way according to your definition of God, what would that look like to you?
well, the first thing I would do is get government out of my relationship. So that signed, agreed piece of paper, I'd do away with that. I would have a ceremony. I would. Your word and your commitment to me is all you should need in front of you. Your elders and your tribe should be all that you need to solidify that relationship. And maybe that's just my bitterness, because after you get the government involved, the government they tear a chunk out of you at the end of it too. So that could just be how I feel about this. I don't feel like all the divorce part of it, there ain't no God in that. That's just a whole bunch of the government ripping you to pieces. Um, but God's way, like I said, I think it's real subjective. I think people, with the help of God, I don't like to put God too much in it. I believe in people taking accountability for themselves. Now you want to rely on the help of God. You want to pray. You want to do anything that you can to make sure that you strengthen yourself spiritually. But that does not supersede or negate your responsibility as an individual to take care of, handle your business. When you mess up, don't blame it on God or the devil. Blame it on yourself and say you're going to do better. So it's just a way that, I look at it, versus, because sometimes people will often use God as an excuse. They use God as a crutch. They use God to browbeat the other person. I'm just very picky when people throw God in to excuse their own behavior. That's just me. And I ain't saying that's you at all, Charzetta. That's just the way the question he asked me, kind of, that's how I reflected off of it.
I agree. I agree.
I appreciate that. So when you talk about kind of this whole concept of surviving divorce, and you examine those areas where the impact of divorce has, spilled over to you, I guess my question would be, how did you start the process of healing? And I'll start with you, Charzetta. How did you start the process of healing?
Honestly, I would say taking time to be by myself and to ask myself some really tough questions, and also give myself some really honest answers. Even if they weren't necessarily true. And when I say honest, I mean like some reality checks, I guess I should say, maybe. Like I was like, okay, Charlesetta, your marriage is over. Like, okay, Charlesetta, you need to move forward. What are the steps you need to take to move forward? So I guess I would just say it came from, my healing started when I started to look at the reality of what my situation was. And knowing that I couldn't wait around to find out. Like don't go to work until you figure out if you're going to stay married or not. Like my life could not be put on hold. I had a little girl that was looking at me, or me to keep living regardless of what was happening. And so I feel like for me, I had to continue to fight and continue to overcome the situation, because I had a little strong-willed girl that was looking at her mom to be Superwoman.
Sure. So I'm gonna ask you this as a follow-up. At any point were you bitter about the experience of having to be divorced, going through the divorce, being divorced, but at any point about to be divorced, divorcing, now divorced, was there any bitterness that you sensed in that at all?
I don't think I was ever bitter. I think I was sad and heartbroken. But I don't think I ever became, I was angry, but I
Sure.
never hated. And I guess when I think of bitter, I think of like maybe my impression or my thoughts towards marriage changed, um, or that it could work or be successful. Um, that never changed. Um, so I want to say became bitter. I think um, I was hurt and I was disappointed. And I did go through. Of course, I went through the grief and loss, all of the steps of grief and loss, because it
Sure.
was like a death. It literally, really, really, really was like I had to bury my ideas and dreams and hopes. I didn't bury them for marriage, but I had to bury them with my husband because it was, of course, we
They,
talked about
they
things that,
were-
yeah, the
yeah.
dreams and things that we talked about that we were, and the things we were going to do together. We were no longer going to be able to do them together. So I had to like, oh my gosh, like this isn't going to happen with him. So I just don't think that I ever became bitter. I think that I actually, honestly, I can share something with you. I know a lady that's really, really bitter, and what happened was she went through some things with her husband, and then like he changed, like for real, and then like over the years he changed, but she stayed angry, and so now he's a changed person, and I mean, nothing like the way he was, and she doesn't get to enjoy the fruit of this new man that she now has.
Right.
Yeah, and so she would pop up in my mind a lot. And so when she popped up in my mind, I would pray for her, and then I would ask God to guard my heart. I would pray for her, and I would ask God to guard my heart, because the one thing I knew I didn't want to become was her, because it's just sad to watch. And so I guess in that sense, it's like how you can have somebody that can be a good example for you, and she was a really bad example for me. But I knew what I didn't want to do.
So Q, I'll bounce the question over to you. Were at any point did you uh, deal with bitterness as a result of either prior, during, or after?
From the relationship, no. That's life. I'm not the first person, and I'm not the last person who have to deal with that. So I'm a strong person. Whatever comes my way, I deal with it and I keep moving. What I will say, and I'm honest enough to admit, I'm very bitter right now when it comes to my children. Um, I went from,
Not towards your children, but because of how it is.
because of the situation with my children, I'm to this day I'm very bitter. I can admit that wholeheartedly. I went from my ex-wife, she left. She left me with the kids. I took care of my kids full time. I went from having my kids 7 days a week to, well, I'll come see them on the weekends. Okay, that's fine. To, I want to set up an agreement to where we see them half and half. Okay, that's fine. To her manipulating the courts and getting them taken away from me, and I only see them 2 weekends out of the month. And every time I see them, they're bigger than they were before, and that's something I'm absolutely bitter about. And that's something that God gonna have to work on me with. But that's something those are certain things that I have an issue with, and it's hard for me. I have a real tough time with forgiveness when that's something that it's a repetitive reminder of what happened and how I don't get to see my children. So that's a very sensitive spot for me. I think I may be getting better at it. Some days I do, and then other days I fall back because it's just something that's repetitive. So yeah, that's
Okay.
where I am with that.
And we want to welcome Miss Cynthia to the conversation. Hey, Cynthia, you're muted. I don't know if you know that, but you're muted. Your mic is muted. There you go.
Hey, what's up? What's up?
All right, but before I jump to you, because I'm gonna ask you some questions here in a minute. I want to know from any of you, have you at any point grieved that prior relationship, that prior marriage? You have, Trozetta. Tell me what you mean. Tell me what that means for you, like having grieved it.
I went through the loss, right? I told you the grief and the loss steps. I really did, but I think for me, the grief, the to know that I actually grieved it and I released it was because I wished him well. Like I pray for him.
Wish him back. That you wished him.
I pray for his marriage now. I want him to be successful. I want them to be successful. I want them to have an amazing marriage. And part of that came in the middle of what I was going through. I told you, like I really talked a lot with my spiritual mom, and I called her one morning, probably about 4:30 in the morning. I'm just crying about what I don't understand and I can't believe, and what I don't understand and what I can't believe. And she said, this is, after I realized what was happening and what was going on. And so she said, this is probably maybe 8 months later. And she said, begin to pray for him, everything that you want for yourself, pray for him, pray for her. And that's what I did. And I started praying for them. Of course, some of it would be like, God, well, today, Jesus, I'm fine, Father. I think I might want them to not have to move to Pluto, and because I didn't want them to die. I just didn't want them to be in Pluto, just not on Earth, breathing the same oxygen, none of that. So, but I think for me, it was releasing and being able to wish well and to pray for blessings and good stuff to happen to them, because I also wanted to sow that seed in my own life. And there were kids that that were not necessarily involved in the situation, but that were around us, like my nieces and nephews on his side, that went from being around our house and being with us all the time. So this definitely impacted them as well. So
I don't think you can properly move on unless you've had you've had that grief. It's a loss, and you have to feel that loss, take it in, so that you can move on from it. I don't think that you are ready to move on if you haven't grieved over the loss of that relationship. So I agree with you totally.
Well, you know what's interesting is that I was actually, that was kind of my point when I brought that up, because I was going to be concerned about how there was really this capacity to move forward without having experienced that grief, without actually having that grief. You know what I'm saying? Because you have to, I think, grieve to actually move on. So I'm gonna start with Cynthia. Now, welcome to the show, girl. Better late than never. She, just so y'all know, she did tell me that she would love to do this, but she had some prior obligations, and I said, okay, go handle your prior obligations, but you show up when you show up, and I'm gonna let you in. And that's what she is. So she's not late because she tarted to the party. She brought the party with her. Okay, so Cynthia, let's go ahead on and let me ask, what impact initially did divorce have in your life, in your self-esteem, in the lives of your children? How was all of that impacted by the divorce?
Greatly. It was greatly impacted. It was, like Q and Trozetta said, a loss. We were together, 11, 12 years. And then even after divorce, we tried to get back together and make it work. So it was a loss, not just for me, but for our kids and our friends, our family, for us to have been together that long. And then we end up in a divorce. My self-esteem was probably pretty low afterwards, but not now. It helps you to see who you really are, and helps you to know your worth after such a devastating event that happens in your life. So you have to know your worth once you come up out of it and gather yourself. you know.
So let me ask you, I think Q and Charles, I want y'all to respond to that because I think that that's an important component. Did you have to kind of reassert for yourself your own sense of value? Okay, I know you said, Q, you said I felt like a failure, and Charzetta, I know you talked about, you know, the kind of devastation that you felt, but overall, didn't you have to kind of go boom and kind of reassert that, okay, this happened, but I still have value? I mean, did you ever kind of experience that kind of thing?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, questioning my value is something that I don't have a lot of problem with. So even I can be even if I'm a failure, I'm still a champion and I'm still a winner. I failed in that arena. My marriage failed, but my marriage failed versus me being a failure is two different things. And what actually allows me to finish, I guess what allows me to move on is I take things from a rational approach. And what I do is I make sure that I do everything in my power to fix, to rectify, to correct everything that I could in the midst of being imperfect. So even my whole point with what I said, even the issues that I had previously in my relationship, I hear echo. Even previously, I fixed those issues. So once you get to the point that you've done everything that you can, even post after she said she wanted a divorce, you know, I'm sending flowers every day. I'm showing love. I'm doing everything that I can to reconcile this relationship. And then once I know I've done all that I can do on my part, then I wipe my hands and I keep on moving. And the moment I keep moving, then when I'm done, then I'm done. And I was finished, and that was it. I knew I did everything I can, and I'm okay with whatever happens after I know I do my part.
Before I let Pastor E jump in, Charzetta, I want to ask you this. This is I wrote this down while y'all were talking because I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. At any time, did you look and ask yourself, was I a contributing factor to this divorce?
Oh yeah. And I even asked him, I was like, okay, so what happened? Like, how did we get here? How did we go from best friends to not together to divorce? Like, how did we get here? I asked myself, I, of course, replayed the relationship in my head and our interaction, what could be done differently. And I guess the interesting part was, a couple of, I guess maybe a year before this all happened, we had a conversation and I guess like kind of a meeting of the minds. Like we were kind of talking about like the new year was coming and we weren't making any New Year's resolutions, but we had talked about like, what are the things that we wanted or we needed from each other. So when it happened, like maybe some months later, I immediately had that conversation and I was like, we just talked. I actually still have the paper. Like I wrote this down. You wrote this down. What happened? So I was lost. I had no clue because we did have a good friendship. And then I just took it upon myself so this is the position that I took. I didn't do anything to end the relationship, but what could I have worked on to be a better me in the relationship? Versus, oh, you know, you could have did this and this and it wouldn't have ended, Charles. I didn't do that. I was like, okay, could I have been more patient? Could I have been more understanding? Could I have been more loving? Could I have made sure this happened or that happened? I did evaluate myself in that way. But deal breakers, I wasn't doing deal breakers, so I knew that it wasn't a deal breaker.
But did you find those things where you said, okay, I can see how I contributed here? Mm-hmm. Or no? Did you?
To us actually divorcing, no. Like I didn't because
you next, so get ready.
You're always a contributor to the success or failure of a relationship. Whether you contribute 2%, 50%, or 90%, there's some contribution. But it's up for you and your future relationships to make sure you identify how you contributed. Some people are just enablers. You could have enabled your partner to go along with a certain behavior for a long time, and not knowing, you still played a part in the failure of that relationship down the road, because you didn't check, you didn't establish value, you didn't establish boundaries. There's always a contribution and something, that a role that you play in the failure or success of a relationship. That's everybody. Always look to find what it is.
All right, so you, and then I'm here past E. So you go ahead on and tell me what did you think? Did you ever evaluate if you were a contributing factor to the divorce?
Absolutely. Prior to, even though infidelity didn't directly cause the divorce, it's a contributing factor that causes strain to the relationship later on down the road. Enabling people, not setting boundaries, allowing her to do kind of whatever she wants because that was my personality. Me not knowing that made her feel like she was less valuable because she didn't understand how my security worked. So she thought that I didn't care just because I was like, hey, do whatever you want to do. Me not being sensitive in the way I communicate with another person. I'm dealing with a woman who has emotions, and the same rational, logical mind I use is not the same way I should always communicate with another person. If they don't communicate in that same type of way, I have to meet them on their levels, because it's not about who's right or wrong or what makes sense or what don't. It's about you two being on the same page and making sure that you're one and on the same team. If you're not doing that, then you're missing the point. So I mean, I can go down the list. There's tons of things that I could have done differently at that time to say, hey, going forward, these are things you need to pay attention to, because it's not always one thing. It's the compilation of several small things that turn into big things, and just slowly creates that wedge in communication, in trust, in understanding, and just being on the same page. So
all right,
that's my answer.
Cynthia, what about you? Did you experience an opportunity to kind of say, how did I contribute to this?
Oh yeah, that was many questions. And of course you wonder, what did I do? What could I have done different? How many more chandeliers could I swing from? So you you ask yourself all these different questions. What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently to kind of save stuff? But then you have to think about, how mature was I at that time? Was I mature enough to really be in that marriage and doing what I was supposed to be doing as a woman of God? So you have to always, I think everyone should always question themselves, and so that you can get better for yourself, so you can try to strive to do something differently in your next relationship.
So Pastor E, how did divorce change you?
Say it one more time.
How did divorce change you?
The ironic thing about it, my divorce did not impact my life until further down the road. Okay. So just so everybody knows, Cynthia is my ex-wife.
Everybody
right?
I didn't know that.
That is my ex-wife. And so the reality is, you asked her a question, right, Pastor Bright? You asked her about, has she ever thought about what she did wrong, or if she contributed? Actually, she was a perfect wife. I was just too young to know it. Because what I saw in a wife wasn't really tangible. What I thought a wife wasn't really what a wife is. Of course, now I find that out afterwards, right? But she literally married a boy. She married a boy that didn't know how to be a husband, right? But the awesome thing is, and this is, I guess I'll put it on a lighter spin, a good note about life after divorce.
I would say she is absolutely my best friend now. Like I would say, there's nothing that we can't talk about. Every time we talk, every day we laugh about something. You know what I mean? Because I think other people will try to hate each other, right? And the reality is, when
Oh,
I
I
see
hate
a
my
picture
wow.
of her, hush. When I see a picture of her and her husband, I always love it. You know why? Because I was never her king. She married her king. I was never a king. And I'm mature enough to realize, and I tell everybody, I ruined a perfect what a marriage because I didn't know how to be a husband. And so, but I think just because you get divorced, divorce does not equal venom. Divorce does not equal hate. We still have kids we got to raise together. And because she spoiled them so bad, it takes both of us to raise them.
I know.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother show, Bishop Bright.
You know what? I know Cynthia's gonna have to leave here in a minute, but I wanted to. Is
That
that
was you.
no? Who texted me?
Q, I'm gonna have to leave shortly.
Oh, okay, cute. All right, no problem. Okay, so here, I did not. Just so everybody knows, I'm not a messy man. Well, maybe
Yes, you are.
Well, yes, you are. But this was not intentional.
but just so everybody knows, Cynthia was my guest. Pastor E, I thought it was appropriate. He wanted to come on and share, and I wanted to do that. And just so y'all know too, from the very beginning, it was me and Tony, Eric, and Cynthia. We did like literally everything together. So when I think about divorce, all right, Paul, ain't nobody talking to you. Bishop, I could have been on this one. Good, because you can be on it next week, Monique. I want you on next week because we're going to continue this conversation. I'm going to have you and Michelle because I want to address some of the stuff Michelle said. But there was an impact to me and Tony when y'all got divorced. There was a real impact because we literally did every single thing together.
Yeah.
Almost every day of our, and Charzetta, you are a witness to that. We were together. If you saw one of us, you typically saw all three of us. I mean, all four of us because we literally
Four.
the four of us. I'm sorry, my math is bad. You saw all four of us together, and so when y'all split up, that was like, what in the hell is going on? What is happening, right? Because Monique, you quit being writing all in the machine. Because y'all not being together affected how we did life together because we did life all together. And so there was some, if I'm honest, and I've never even talked about this out loud, to be honest, but I think there was some anger, and Eric, it was mostly towards you.
Yeah.
Hello? I think he's having his thing.
And not only y'all, Roy, even our kids, because you know, our kids grew up together.
They grew up together. They did everything together, right? And so this idea that all of that was changing was like, I didn't do nothing.
Right.
All of this was like, I didn't do nothing. Tony didn't do nothing. Why are we suffering? Because they have to get a divorce. And Eric, I don't know if you heard me say this, but I was mad at you. Did you hear me? Huh? No, I didn't know if you were back and you could hear me. Because you changed my wife and I, we got married. I think I was 21 or 22. Let's see, how old am I now? I'm 50. We've been married 28 years. I was 22. No, this would be 29. So I was 21 when we got married. And no, I was 22 because my birthday's next month. Never mind. Anyway, I was 22 And so I was young, we were all hanging out. And I was like, the friend that I did everything with, now, it's all gone. So I didn't realize it until even just kind of talking about it now. I think I was mad at you, Eric.
And I think you probably had good reason to be, honestly. But I think what happens is, what I've always taught and preached and whatever is a word called accountability. Now, I never taught it until I learned what it was. Until I learned to I had to learn how to take accountability for my part in our overall divorce, in our overall relationship. But at the same time, I think what happens when you take accountability and then you grow. Everybody should learn from any pain that they go through, right? So I think what happens is when people don't grow from a divorce, what they do is naturally we start blaming the other one and taking self-accountability. When you don't take a self-accountability, you're no good to the new relationship. When you're not accountable for what you did in the past, you take that same person who you are and the new relationship, and then you end up having the same issues that you had the old relationship.
Yeah.
So I never, and also, I think it's important. I quit guilting myself over not being the best husband. I quit living with that, because as long as I guilt myself, I wasn't opening up myself for any other relationship with her outside of marriage, right? Either it's marriage or this, not knowing how much that we would still need each other as co-parents, need each other as friends. And so, like I said, like I literally, like have no, she deserves to be having bad cheese because, once again, I think she finally married her king. And so I grew from my mistake. I grew from marriage. I grew from divorce.
Okay, so Trozetta, Pastor E and has described kind of their relationship now as one where they are the best of friends. They talk regularly. They have meaningful, productive conversations. Things that essentially I don't think were successful for them while they were married. Are you in any regular communication with your ex-husband?
Oh yeah. It took some years, like I said, and then he actually called one day and we had a really good conversation. It started out about our daughter, but then it ended up into the conversation about our past and us, and he apologized and he gave me the answers. And what was interesting about it was he gave me, this is how I knew that God had moved on his heart and he was at a different place for real. He answered all of the questions that I asked God and myself about the relationship without me having to say, well, do you remember this? And do you remember that time and why? And I can't, what happened? I didn't ask anything. He just started talking and he apologized and we're good. We're at a good place. We if we need, Taylor's actually with him. So when we talk, it's cordial, it's respectful, it's kind. I know that I wish him the best, and I believe that he wishes me the best.
All right, because I think that that's important too, because I think that also kind of demonstrates that you've grown, that you've moved on, that you have, in the words of Nicole, that you've allowed yourself to experience some forgiveness.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think that Eric and Cynthia would be communicating, you and your ex-husband would be communicating if there was not a level of forgiveness that had taken place. And so, Cynthia, I want to ask you this question. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm serious. Monique and Michelle, I want y'all on next week because I really want to address some of the statements that Michelle made. I know we just don't have the time to do it tonight, but Cynthia, I wanted to ask you, when you finally healed from the broken relationship, and you got into the new relationship, did you realize, yes, maybe I am in fact healed, or did you find yourself bringing over the insecurities that were built in your previous relationship to Eric? Did that filter over, any of that filter over into your new relationship? And I want all three of you guys to answer that question too, but I'll start with you, Cynthia.
No, I didn't really go into, because I did take a time of just me, getting to know me and allowing God to work on me. So by the time me and Tony had got together, I was good. I was like, okay, I'm not insecure. I'm not, oh, he looking at another woman, that type of thing. We could be in the grocery store. Some woman hit on him. He's like, hey, I'm married. My wife is a little crazy. So you might want to move around,
Yeah.
So, so I don't really think I took anything into our marriage, like carried any baggage, because I had already laid it out on the altar. I had already kind of went past that stage. I think I went through it, being watchful, and okay, is he demonstrating any of the things that I just left, or that I just moved away from? I don't think our relationship has been built on that type of level. And because I'm mature now in God, and he's mature in God, and we're pretty secure in our relationship, I don't feel like I took any of that baggage into that, which is a good thing, because when you carry it over into another relationship, it makes it a lot harder. It makes your relationship with that individual a lot harder to build, because you're always reminding yourself of the past. So I tend to, kind of forget the past. We even have conversations. I tell him different stories. He tell me different stories. And now it's comical, because when I first moved to Arizona and I used to talk to Eric on the phone, he would be, I get under his skin, he get mad, and he's, I gotta go to a meeting. He'd try to hurry up and get off the phone. So now when I'm irritating Tony, he said, I gotta go to a meeting. So like, oh, now you got a meeting. So no, I think, once you heal and you find yourself, number one, because some people would be like, well, let me get another dude just to get over somebody else. No, just get through it, go through it, don't stay in it too long, and keep moving.
All right. Charzetta, I don't know if you're married again yet or not. But did you bring any of the baggage from your old relationship into your new relationship, Charzetta?
No, I don't. I believe that I did. I intentionally took steps to make sure that I processed my feelings, my emotions, my thoughts, and actually just the experience, like what actually just happened. What did I just go through? How did it affect me? And I did go to have counseling to help work through those processes and through those steps. And I tried to be really real with myself about what was going on and what I felt. And one of my things, I really wanted to move forward. I really did not want to have any weight. And I told you, I had someone that, that I could picture and visualize that I did not want to be like. So that I feel like I took the necessary steps not to intentionally not bring extra or baggage. Not just into my next relationship, but just in moving forward. There were things that I wanted to do, and I knew I couldn't have a hard heart or a bitter heart to do those things. So.
All right, Pastor E, did you have any lingering baggage or whatever from your relationship with Cynthia that you took into a new relationship? Did you drag anything in
Actually, I've been thinking about it, and I don't think so because I was kind of like a whole different person by that point. You know what I mean?
Okay. Okay.
Maybe I can't recall. I can't recall. I don't know because my whole lifestyle changed after my counseling, which was so far removed from her.
Okay. Well, guys, let me say thank you again for coming on, being open and truthful and vulnerable and having this conversation. This has been amazing. Everybody, we're going to do part 2 of this next week. Michelle, I need both you and Monique to inbox me your email addresses so that I can connect and communicate with you guys. But I want to share one thing before everybody leaves. I want you to please go check out IamRoybright.com. IamRoybright.com. Go check out the website, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because we have launched a brand of clothes. We have some shirts and some hoodies, some masks. I got onesies for kids that have different kinds of sayings and things that I was inspired by God to put out so that people can wear. Please go and check out, everybody, go and check out I Am Roy Bright. Look at the store. Just get a mask, get a t-shirt, get something. I know that you're going to be inspired by what you see. IamRoybright.com. I see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great, great, great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye.